Ma'am, good evening, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello. Good evening, ma'am.
Oh, good evening. Good evening. I'll start in two, 3 minutes.
Actually,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yeah, it's just a recap class
Like,
basically about all the previous. It's an overview session.
oh, okay, ma'am. But I have one question I want to challenge, or I want one clarification, ma'am,
Okay. Okay.
regarding one problem
Okay. Ask.
that sir discussed.
Yes. Sure. Do
That
you want? Do you
that
want
sir
to?
di- did in one of the lecture class.
Okay.
In lecture 51, he didn't solve, but he gave final answers. In lecture 51, last problem.
Okay. Do you have it with you?
Yes, ma'am. I
Can you
have.
share the screen because I don't. I have to search for lecture 51. Can you share and show me?
Yes, ma'am. One
Okay.
minute.
I'll stop presenting then.
Are you able to seeing that screen, ma'am?
Yes. Yes.
This one, I was solving, but I am getting different answers.
Oh. Okay. So this is just regular moment distribution method.
Yes, ma'am.
At joint
Actually,
B.
I tried to solve.
Yes. Tell.
I try to solve. I'm trying to solve this question, but I'm not getting that theta d. That theta b is 1.25, but I'm getting different answers.
Okay.
So
So you are
I
able to
want to one
you are able to solve it. You know the method of solving, but you are getting wrong answer. Like you are it's not matching here, right?
Yes,
Okay, can you show me your solution?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Same thing. It is in tab, ma'am. It is.
Okay, tell me the approach once. You are taking the fixed end moments in you are taking three members A B, B D and BC, and
Yes, ma'am.
A for A and B there is the fixed end moment formula will be I think PL by 8, right? Because it's a
Yes,
concentrated
ma'am. Yes,
force at
ma'am.
the center. For the
Yes,
uniform,
ma'am. Yes.
that's how you're the for the
Yes,
UDL is
ma'am.
WL square by 12, and for this BC also. And then
Yes, ma'am.
you made that moment distribution table. And how
It's not moment. Sorry, ma'am. This one is slope deflection.
oh, okay, okay,
This
this is
this lecture slope deflection equation.
okay, but
It,
whichever method
it
you
is
use,
followed by.
you're going to get the same answer.
Yes.
So if it
Yes,
will be,
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
if you can share your solution, it will be better because I need
Uh,
to see. You can
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
mail yourself from your tab and share maybe.
Yes, ma'am. I can do that.
Okay.
Can you please?
Yes, I'll wait.
I will stop the screen sharing, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
How is IAC, ma'am?
ISC as a college? Did you?
I mean about how it is now.
Of,
Actually, I did my MTech project there only.
oh, okay. Yeah, it's nice. It's always nice. The campus is so nice, and there's a research culture here. You already have an MTech. You're there is some
MTech
network.
from NIT, NIT Pondicherry.
Okay, okay. Oh. So you're taking this course
My
because
MTech project. I'm just following revision classes. Like I'm not actually following the sir classes. I'm just having revision through your scholars problem solving sessions.
oh, okay, okay. Because you want to give some competitive exam or something.
I want to try. I'm planning to get a job like that.
Okay, okay. Yeah,
No,
this course is very important.
initial. Yes, ma'am. I'm stopping my screen sharing, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, mail ID.
You are mailing me? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought.
I don't know your email, ma'am.
No, I thought you were mailing yourself and then sharing this to anywhere.
No, 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 ma'am. I actually have it.
Okay. I
Okay,
wrote
ma'am.
in the chat box.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've seen that.
Tell me when you have mailed.
I will, ma'am. Actually, it is in tab. I have to prepare that in PDF and
Yeah, yes, yes,
I have
okay.
to
Anyway,
send
it's
you.
not 7 o'clock yet, so you take your time.
This will be the last problem solving
Yes,
session, or you will be having one more on Tuesday. If this will be last problem solving session of yours, or are you taking one more
there is
on
one. Yes,
Tuesday?
there is one more next Tuesday about the stiffness matrix method. There are 12 weeks.
What's your thesis, ma'am?
Yes.
What is your project thesis?
My PhD thesis is about reduced order modeling. It is more about computational methods than exactly civil engineering. But in
Okay.
PhD, the topic keeps evolving. It's not just a project topic that you are given like MTech or BTech projects. Under whose guidance did you do in your MTech project?
Professor Anbalagan, sir. Geotech.
Okay, okay. Because I am from
Uh,
structures, so I mostly know
yeah, yes, ma'am.
process.
Its file showing 26 MB, ma'am. Actually,
Okay.
it's not loading.
Okay, no, I see. 1 second.
It's not getting
It's not getting attached.
loading it properly.
Can
Yes,
you?
ma'am. It is actually showing file 5G is 26 MB.
Oh, okay. Then,
I
do
don't
you have
know how
any
to
idea where
share.
the issue, where the problem could be in your solution? Like, do you have any any doubt in the question? No, right? You solved it to the end. Just answer.
I'm not. Yes, ma'am. I am not having any doubt. It's the thing that I'm not getting, not matching that answer with what target.
Okay, and have you solved other questions with the slope deflection method?
Yes, ma'am. I got actually.
There
I
the
got
answers
all
are
the
matching.
answers.
So, okay, so maybe something might be wrong here in the
Yes, ma'am.
solution as well, because the method will say the stay the same. And just to check, you can, STAD or any simple analysis software.
Yeah, ma'am. Start. You know
Then you can
that
just
we
model that.
usually did.
Huh?
Actually, that I did in BTech, but I don't have that license, right, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
Now I don't have license.
There are some online analysis softwares as well. You can just check it, check it, or maybe you can apply the moment distribution method and see if your answer is still coming the same, and you know both methods independently, and you are getting the same answer. Yours is probably correct. You
Okay,
can
ma'am.
either
I
check with the
will.
moment distribution method, or you can model it in an analysis software and check. And if there also there is Sir's answer, then you have to look into where the problem is coming. But the concept will say the same. If you have solved problems previously, it shouldn't change. Like yours might be correct. And if you can send me the solution, I can check. I mean, if there's any problem with the net
Yes,
now,
ma'am,
later I can.
I try to write in another notes, and that will be the only that notes I will share to you.
Okay.
Maybe it will, I will do that.
Okay.
Actually, last tweet itself, I thought of asking you, but I'm actually parallelly watching another problem solving session, so I didn't make it to you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay.
Actually, on that day, purple suits you well, but match for the other way.
Okay. I'll start the class in the meanwhile. If you are looking to upload it, I'll stop it and check it then. Welcome to the overview session of Structure Analysis 1 taught by Professor Amit Shah. I'm Chisha Chakraborty, one of the course teaching assistants. I'm a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. The first question that we ask before starting a course is why do we need this? So, why do we need structure analysis? So, analysis is the process that is performed prior to the design stage. um, our ultimate target as structural engineers is to construct buildings or bridges or any kind of structures, and for we do that by following a design. Design means the materials, what materials we'll use, what are the structural elements we'll use, how we will connect them, and for RCC buildings, for concrete buildings, we how much steel to be put inside each concrete member and so on. And before that, the step just before that is structural analysis. So what analysis does is it provides the internal forces and stresses corresponding to the design loads. So loads are what there are several types: dead load, live load, wind load, earthquake load, and in offshore structures, tidal loads and all. So those are the loads I know that I expect to be coming on my structure. So I want my structure to withstand them. So that is an overall load coming on the structure as a whole. Then I have to perform analysis to get what is the demand on every single element. So this is an iterative process, analysis and design. We will propose some sort of structural design, and then we are going to analyze it and find out the stresses or the internal forces and the displacements and strains inside each of the members. And I'm going to see that if it is enough, whatever dimensions and materials I have proposed, are they uh, enough to withstand the loads, then I can let the design go ahead. Otherwise, I have to revise my design, and then I have to again carry out a structural analysis of the entire structure. So, structural analysis typically accounts for the materials to be used, applied loads, and geometry of the structure or object. In the overview of the course, there are two phases. First phase is analysis of determinate structures, and phase two is analysis of indeterminate structures. In week one, we looked at types of internal forces: bending moment, shear force, torsional moment, and axial force. And the types of elements, the common classification of elements, beams, trusses, and frames being the most common ones, and boundary conditions like pinned, hinged, fixed support, internal hinge, and all. And classification of elements, as I say, is done more based on what kind of force I expect to be coming on the structures. For example, columns in a building, like the vertical members, I mostly expect compression. It mostly expected to undergo compression. In very rare cases, they will undergo tension. So that is a kind of, so that is why we treat that particular element as a column and not as a beam. It's not because the beam is horizontal and the column is vertical. It's because what kind of forces I will expect them to withstand. So that is, beams and columns are more complete. Like beams and columns of buildings are more complicated elements. Beam element, truss element, and frame element are idealized elements that we use to study structural analysis, and the concepts we can increase or combine into real world structural elements. And the structural indeterminacy, which is a very important topic, which relates to redundancy, or how oversafe the structure is. In the real world, all structures are redundant, so structurally determinate is something we find only in structural analysis courses. They don't actually exist because we would want some sort of backup in our structure. So in case something wrong happens, I would want at least my structure to take one or two failure modes before it actually collapses. And then bending moment and shear force diagrams, which are finding out the force or stress type responses of beams. Internal forces induced in a structure. So bending moment that occurs when an external force is applied to the element, causing it to bend. So that is when the force is applied transverse to the length of the element. Shear force is force that acts parallel to the cross section of a structural element when an external force is applied. So most often bending moment and shear force occur in pairs, because the transverse load that is causing an element to bend also provides a shear, also makes a shear force develop in the transverse direction. So that is why it's parallel to the cross section and it's perpendicular to the length of the member. Torsional moment is produced by a twisting force applied to the body along the transverse axis of the body. So the axis, it's a twisting moment basically, that's the best way to describe it. And axial force is force that acts in the direction of the axis of a body. So axial force and torsional moment are a pair, though axial force does not always provide torsional moment, while shear force and bending moment always go in pairs. This is how they are visualized. This is a tensile, this is tension, but it could also be compression where the arrows are pointing into the member. And tension and compression both come under axial force. Shear force is when the force is see parallel to the cross section and perpendicular to the length. And bending is also this shear force will also cause some sort of bending, and torsion is a twisting movement. The common types of elements in 2D plane are truss element, it transfers only axial force. And how do we ensure that? We ensure that by joining all the members by pin joints, so that ensures that the load transfer mechanism is in such a way that every member, so that the overall load applied distributes itself as a tension or a compression in every member. Beam element transfers only shear force and bending moment, and frame element transfers axial moment, shear force, and bending moment. So whatever we call a beam, we visualize to be a beam, like for example a cantilever beam. If I just apply an axial force at the tip, it will become a frame element. Even though the beam is not physically changing, it's because that is the kind of force that is coming on the structure. Types of supports in 2D plane. Roller support restricts displacement only in the direction perpendicular to it. So it's obvious, it is drawn by two wheels. So the wheels, it is free to move in the horizontal direction. The member is also free to rotate. So it does not provide any restraining moment or any restraining horizontal force. But there is the surface on which it is resting, that in that direction the roller won't allow the member to displace. Hinge support restrict displacement in both directions. It restricts translational displacement in both directions. And fixed supports also restricts the out of plane moment, which are there are 3 degrees of freedom available in the 2D plane, and the fixed support restricts all three of them. Structural indeterminacy. Structures that cannot be analyzed using statics or equations of equilibrium only are called indeterminate structures. They require other material properties to be solved, as we have seen in the last few weeks when we have been solving indeterminate structures. The material properties like Young's modulus and some geometry properties like area and moment of inertia are also coming into the question. While in determinate structures, the only property that matters apart from the load and boundary condition is the length of the member. The degree of indeterminacy is number of unknown reactions minus the number of equations of equilibrium that we have looked at in great detail in the last few weeks. External indeterminacy is the total number of independent support reactions minus total number of available equations of static equilibrium. Internal indeterminacy is total number of internal reactions and minus available equations of equilibrium. And adding these two, we get degree of structural indeterminacy. There are some formulas that we use to find out these degrees of indeterminacy in various types of elements, but you can also perceive them intuitively. So if you know the intuition, you don't have to remember. You don't have to exactly remember the formula. Examples, this is a cantilever beam. It has, since it is only undergoing vertical loading, I'll say it has two equations of equilibrium, that is sigma Fy equal to 0 and sigma Mz equal to 0. Mz is, and the moment while we are taking the equilibrium, we can take it about any point in the plane. It does not even have to be part of the beam. And there are two restraints provided by this fixed support, because this x direction force is not valid here, so there will be one force in the y direction Ry and one restraining moment. So this is a determinate structure. One of the simplest determinate beams is a cantilever beam, and this is one step ahead of it. It's a propped cantilever, so it has one extra support here, a support reaction here, Rc, in the vertical direction. So this is 1 degree indeterminate. This is a frame with two fixed ends. So for frame element, each fixed support provides three reactions each, so six, and there are three equations available. So 6 - 3, this is 3 degree indeterminate. And a frame with two hinge supports has four unknowns and four unknown reactions and three equations of equilibrium. So it is 1 degree indeterminate. Internal forces in beams, shear force and bending moment. So this is just a this is a normal cantilever beam, and a section, we take a section AA here. Suppose I'm applying a force. We know that like the classification of beam elements is that it won't undergo axial force. So the type of force applied here is shear force. It is parallel to the cross section and perpendicular to the length of the beam. So the force that is this is a force applied, and for that at every section you can find a pair of shear forces. So this is V and V. Since it is an internal force, it is getting balanced out. V up. on this surface is V upwards, on this surface is V downwards, and there will be a pair, a couple, moment couple as well, M and M. Internal forces always has to have to balance each other out. So the this P, the reaction of the P will come at this fixed support, not in anywhere in between. But since there is a this shear force has to there is a basically a load transfer mechanism. It has to transfer from the tip to the tip to the support. So the load transfer mechanism of a cantilever beam is that I apply a force at the tip. The force has to be transferred to the support ultimately, because that is what provides stability in the structure. So while the transfer is occurring, a pair of shear forces and bending moments keep developing along the entire length of the beam. So this is what shear force and bending moment at each section is. Yes, good evening, Aman. Sign convention, it's again sign convention for bending moment and shear force is not as intuitively easy as for example for equations of equilibrium. We just take left positive, right negative, or upward positive, downward negative, and we are done with it. Bending moment, since it is an internal force or internal reaction, whatever, the sign convention comes in pairs, because as I said, internal forces have to balance each other out. Internal forces cannot have an overall implication in the structure. So this is a sagging moment where it's on the left face it is clockwise and on the right face it is anti-clockwise. I call the bending moment positive. And sagging is an English word that means like some sort, for example, a clothesline. When you put clothes on it on the string, it will sag like this. So that is a sagging profile, and the hogging profile is the reverse of it. That is I call negative. But there's one note of always with a sign convention. You are free to choose your own sign convention. If you want, you can call this negative and this positive. But in an exam, if you want to do that, you have to mention it. So it's better. I always used to mention even this convention when I'm using, which most books use. I used to write the sign convention in copies just to be extra sure. And shear force is when the left up on the left face upward shear force is positive, and on the right face downward shear force is positive, and vice versa. Shear force diagram SFD and bending moment diagram BMD. This is a graph. These are basically graphical representations of the shear force distribution and bending moment distributions along the length of a beam. For example, this is a this is a simply supported beam with two overhangs. So there is a hinge support here, a roller support here, and the forces, there is a concentrated load at one tip. There is a UDL inverse of span. There is also a concentrated moment. So it is pretty much covers all the bases. And the shear force is generally like the bending moment diagram is 1 degree higher than the shear force, which we have seen from experience. So by now you should be able to draw the bending moment and shear force diagrams quite easily and intuitively. But when we solved it using, we found out equations with the like we took a section X, and then we found out the equations and then we drew it. But the more you practice, the more you can just draw it looking at the diagram. Then week 2 was about idealization of trusses, as like using line elements, stability of trusses, and solving member forces in a truss using method of joints and method of sections. So what is a truss? Formally, an assembly of two force members connected by nodes that creates a rigid structure, and every node is a pin support. So that pins or hinge supports at both ends. If you make a structure where every member is connected, like every node is a pin support, then as I said, the load transfer occurs in such a way that only axial forces, that is tension or compression, develops in the members. This is actually about the boundary conditions. It's not that a truss, the truss is just a structure and you are applying a load on it, horizontal or vertical, whatever. But the fact that it the forces distribute in such a way that it's axial force in all the members is because of the support conditions, that there are pin support at all ends. So it does not carry any load in between. So the loading also is only at the tips, like only at the nodes, and only have two forces acting upon them at the hinges. Member is only under axial loading, like each member, no shear, bending, or torsion. This is how the force develops. Like there are forces, but there can be multiple forces. Like this, if there are multiple members meeting at a node, there will be forces coming from all sides, but the resultant will be oriented along the length of the member. That is what axial force is. Types of axial loading: tension, which attempts to elongate the member, and compression, which attempts to shorten the member. It's the names are also really intuitive. You know what tension and compression in English means. So tension, we draw it by putting arrows away from the member, So away from the member is even in when we solve trusses, the sign convention that we use is if we get a force away from the member, it's tension. If it's into the member, it's compression. Idealization of trusses. This is a real world trusses. Trusses are especially found in bridges and also in roof like steel in the roofs of steel sheds and all. But bridges are one of the most common. You would have seen in any city truss bridges. So there is a truss. There is a 2D truss. Then there is another 2D truss, and they are joined by cross members. And then we put a deck either through the truss or on top of the truss. There are both kinds of bridges. This is a truss. This is a through truss bridge. So this is the deck here. So the car will pass inside the truss. The Howrah Bridge of Kolkata is one of the most famous truss bridges in India. So this is a 3D structure, and trusses can be idealized into 2D structures because each bay of the truss is a basically almost a 2D member, is a 2D structure. So this is how we are going to every member I am drawing by a straight line and I'm joining them by nodes. Stability of truss, external and internal. There is always two aspects of stability. For external stability, it must satisfy the three equations of equilibrium. Obviously, that is a basic condition, and then there are two extra conditions for trusses because of like these do not exist in beams or frames. All sub no, I guess they do exist, but we don't specifically mention it. But all support reactions must not be parallel because if there are three support reactions and they are all parallel, then if a force perpendicular to that direction comes, the truss will move. Like imagine it, a truss is only on three roller supports. If I put a horizontal force, it will just wheel along the horizontal direction. So it is not stable. And all support reactions must not be concurrent, so they should not all be passing through the same line. So this is linear instability and this is rotational instability. So if all three of my reaction forces pass through one point, there will be there is if I apply a moment in about that point, if the truss will rotate. Internal stability, no part of the truss can move rigidly relative to another part. Number of joints needed for geometric stability, M is 2j minus 3. You know that from already from like by now you know about structural indeterminacy. So we know that degree of some structural indeterminacy is uh, 2j minus 2j plus 3 minus m, something like that. So we know that the degree of structural indeterminacy has to be greater than or equal to 0. It cannot be less than 0. So if a structure is like you not even determinate, then it is unstable. That is why when we put that 0 on that side, we can get that the minimum number of members we need is 2j minus 3. But that is not enough. It also matters how you arrange them. So members must be arranged such that truss can be divided into triangular blocks. There can be no rectangular or polygonal blocks. Otherwise, in some conditions of loading, it might fold in upon itself. So see, this truss is apparently if you just apply this formula, you will see that this truss is determinate. Like the degree of indeterminacy will be 0. It won't be negative. But the way I have arranged the members is not enough. So it is externally stable, but this member I have to move and put here because this part is extra determinate and this part is indeterminate and this part is unstable. So this formula is not enough. Keep that in mind. So J is 6, M required is 9, and there are 9 members, but the presence of rectangular block makes it unstable. Method of joints, suitable when forces in all members are to be calculated, generally for subjective exams. At each joint, there are two equations of equilibrium, sigma fx is 0 and sigma fy is 0. Method cannot be applied if the number of unknown forces at a particular joint is more than 2. So we have to approach it in such a way that the first joint that I solved has to have only two members. Then once I have solved those two forces, I'll move on to a joint where now that I know this force, I have only two unknowns. So you have to go such that at every joint there are two unknowns. Otherwise, it's not a determinate structure. You will need other methods like method of consistent deformations to solve it. Sign convention: force in a member is shown by double arrows. For tension, arrows point away from each other. For compressions, arrows point towards each other. This is tensile force. This is compression force, as we have seen. Method of sections is suitable when forces are required in only few members, so it's more useful in competitive exams because there in MCQ exams you won't be asked to solve the member forces in all the members. So they will ask certain members from the middle generally. So you have to know how to cut the section to solve the question fastest. So it is similar to another similar thing is the moment area theorems. You have to know which only comes from practice. You have to know exactly how to apply the method to get the answer in the fastest manner. See, generally in civil engineering, it's not a race against time thing. Civil engineering is a slow process, like analysis, design, iterations between that, and the construction process. So generally, we are not under that kind of time pressure that you have to solve it in 2 minutes. But to get into the jobs, you need to clear the competitive exams, and for that, you have to know how to apply this smartly. The whole truss is cut into portions via sections, and equilibrium of each portion is considered. This is not a node wise in equilibrium with only two equations of equilibrium. Since I'm considering the structures as the two portions as a whole, we have three equations. The regular one, sigma fx equal to 0, sigma fy equal to 0, and sigma mz equal to 0. So suppose I need the force in this member, or in this member I'm going to cut the truss here, and I'm going to see either from the left side or from the right side. I'm going to apply the equations of equilibrium and I'll find it. I have three unknowns here, so I cut through three members. I have three. Just look at the left free body part. I have three unknowns, and I know I can find out three equations corresponding to these, so I can solve them. Okay, week three is now, so far we have seen only the force and stress type responses. From week 3, we look at the displacement or strain type responses, the ones which actually correspond to the serviceability limit states. The force type responses are related to the ultimate or collapse limit states in our code. These are terms used in the Indian standard codes. So, force related problems make a structure collapse. Serviceability limit related problems like over a part of a beam overly deforming or overly elongating, they do not usually cause collapse on the structure in the structure. Even if they don't cause collapse, there are other serviceability criteria that I need my structure to satisfy. The example that my father always gives is that in factories, if you have to, in a steel factory, suppose you have to move a huge crane through a door. So the door, suppose the door frame, that the beam on the top of the door, which is called a lintel beam, suppose the lintel beam has not collapsed, but it has deformed so much that it is obstructing the movement of an instrument. So then my building or my structure is not really serving its purpose. So that is where the serviceability word comes from. So the methods to solve, in if we focus on trusses, we use the principle of virtual work, which gives rise to the unit load method to determine nodal displacements in a truss. So this is a principle of virtual work. The work done by a force is, we know that it is a integration of force dx from the first point to the last point. Conservative force is work when the work done is path independent, like gravity. Non-conservative force is when the work done is path dependent, for example friction. So if you take a block in a roundabout way along a ground, then we'll be losing more energy, we'll be applying more energies if there is friction. This work done by gravity, it just depends on the first and last configuration. The first configuration is here, the last configuration is here, the distance is h, that is all that matters. But in friction, the distance also matters. At equilibrium, a structure deforms such that its potential energy is minimized. So external load have to be equal to the internal forces, and external work has to be equal to the internal work. This is the principle of virtual work, states that work done by a real force acting through a virtual displacement, or work or virtual force acting through a real displacement. So these, in an equilibrium state, which is what we are solving, because of course we are solving a structure in equilibrium. If it is not an equilibrium, if it is actually moving, then no stress or force will be developed in the structure, so I'm not interested in that. In equilibrium, the virtual force work of the forces applied to a system is zero. This is what it states. So from that we can anyway find out that the force developed in a simple spring mass system is F equal to mg. You can get that from equilibrium, you can also get it from the principle of virtual work. Application of principle of virtual work is unit load method to find deflection of trusses. We go node wise. Response of a structure. There are two types, as I said, force and stresses. Collapse limit state, or also called ultimate limit state, and displacement or strains, which are corresponding to the serviceability limit state. In a truss, the two things that we are concerned about are member forces that we solve using method of sections or joints, and the nodal displacement, which we solve using the unit load method. So unit load method is a technique to quantify displacements and rotations of equilibrium configuration of a structure, and it is not actually only restricted to trusses, but we use in trusses generally, because in beams we have better methods or easier methods. So technique to quantify displacements or rotations of equilibrium configuration of a structure, that is the shape of the structure after it has managed to equilibrate the applied loads. Virtual unit force is applied at the node where we want to calculate the displacement. And logically, a virtual unit moment will be applied if I want to find out the slope. So they are corresponding to each other: force, displacement, and moment, slope. And we generally use the term force and displacement to capture both of these, because we use force. Generally, we say that the loading on a structure, we don't say force and moments, we just say forces. But generally, moment is included in that concept. For unit force, and external virtual work is 1 into delta, where delta is the displacement component I'm interested in. And since external virtual work is equal to internal virtual work, this delta is equal to internal virtual work. So that is what we are finding out. Okay, I won't go into the details of this, but you have solved it. And this is a, like, we draw a table with the P system of forces, the K system of forces, and the lengths and A and E of each member, and we get that. Week 4 was deflection of beams, and week 4 and 5 were both about deflection of beams. Basically, elastic curve equation method is when we go from the first principle. We find out all physical phenomena are governed by differential equations. So for a beam, we know that its mx is mx by ei is m of x by ei is d2 y dx square. Sign convention might be something. In some books it's minus, in some books it's plus. So from that we can integrate my expression twice. And okay, I'll go into just in a while. Elastic curve equation method is from the first principle. Moment area method and conjugate beam methods are shortcut methods which are used to solve something quickly. So your terminologies in beam theory. So there's a neutral surface. A beam is formed by many fibers aligned longitudinally like this. So these are all fibers. Longitudinally means along the length of the beam. Under action of downward transverse loads, fibers near the top of the beam contract. So it's bending in such a profile that the top surface is contracting and the bottom fibers are elongating. So there must be a plane in between, somewhere in between, where the fibers of the beam do not change their length. That is called the neutral surface. And the neutral axis, since we generally talk in 2D terms, the axis of the beam is the intersection of the neutral surface and the longitudinal symmetry. So generally we don't draw this in 3D. We just take the 2D version. Deflection curve: when the beam is loaded, the neutral axis or surface deforms into a curve, which is called a deformation curve or elastic curve. There are some Euler-Bernoulli beam assumptions. These you find these in any textbooks. I don't think these are generally asked in this course, but the beam section is infinitely rigid in its own plane. According to this assumption, there is no deformation in the plane of the cross section. The cross section of the beam remains plane to the deformed axis, plane, and the cross section of the beam remains normal to the deformed axis of the beam. These are the governing differential equations. Q is the shear force, Q of x is the shear force, and M of x is the moment, bending moment. W is the transverse vertical deflection, like from the original position of the neutral axis and to the like the changed orientation of the neutral axis. The distance it moves transversely is the W here. X is the distance along the axis of the beam, goes from 0 to L, and X and W are therefore in perpendicular directions. X is along the beam, W is perpendicular to the beam. E is a Young's modulus, it is a material property, and I is the second moment of area, it's a geometric property. And these M, Q, and W vary around the axis of the beam, they are functions of X. There are some compatibility or continuity conditions, which are equations essential for solving indeterminate structure, considering the displacement equilibrium of the structure. They need to be satisfied for determinate structures as well. It basically means that at a single point in a structure, there cannot be more than one displacement, horizontal, vertical, or rotational. It seems obvious that how can one point undergo two displacements, but that is the concept of compatibility that is applied in all our in our moment distribution and no, sorry, in the force methods, in the method of considered deformation. Otherwise, there will be discontinuity. It is not allowed. So now the moment area method, there are two theorems. Theorem 1 states that the change in slope between any 2 points of the on the elastic curve equals the area of m by ei moment diagram between these 2 points. So once you have the bending moment diagram, this is where the the what you have learned in the first class comes into play. You have to draw the bending moment diagram first. Then you just divide all the ordinates by ei. It doesn't. Once you have the bending moment diagram, you also have the m by ei diagram. So the change in slope between any 2 points on the elastic curve equals the area of the m by ai diagram between these 2 points. And theorem 2 states that the vertical deviation of a point B on an elastic curve with respect to the tangent which is extended from another point C equals the moment of the area under the m by ai diagram between those 2 points. This moment is computed about point B where the deviation from B to C is to be determined. So to use these two, you need practice because it's without practice it's very difficult to identify and apply theorem 2 especially. Conjugate beam methods has just certain rules. So I have a real beam. I will construct a conjugate beam from that. So it's a structural analysis technique used to analyze beams and frames by conjugate real beams into imaginary or conjugate beams. We apply principles of virtual work and static equilibrium on conjugate beams to solve for unknowns and understand the behavior of the real beam under various loading conditions. So there is a principle of duality between the real and imaginary beams. The real beam is subjected to load and support conditions, which is my input in the problem. It is transformed into an equivalent imaginary beam, which has the same length as a real beam, and it is subjected to loads equivalent to the bending moment along the length of the real beam. The transformation simplifies the analysis process. So there are some rules for loading conjugate beam. M by EI diagram of real beam is the load on conjugate beam, and sign convention is the same as that of bending moment diagram. Positive or sagging moment is upward loads. Negative or hogging bending moment is downward load. So what I do is I draw the M by EI diagram of the real beam, and I use that as loading on the conjugate beam. And then at whichever point I want the slope or moment, I'm going to solve the bending moment and shear force in that conjugate beam. And if I end up with a positive bending moment at that point, okay, sorry, this is about the loading. If from my M by EI diagram of the real beam, if there is positive bending moment, I'm going to apply an upward load, and other vice versa. And here there are some also some like, and the interpretation where once we have the conjugate beam and we have solved the conjugate beam, we the bending moment at the beam will correspond to the displacement, and the shear force at the conjugate beam will correspond to the slope. So these are some the boundary condition duality. Fixed support becomes free support, free end becomes fixed support, and so on. So influence line diagram in week 6, it's to do with moving loads, moving a unit load moving along the length of the beam, or a unit moment moving along the length of the beam. The Muller-Breslav's principle helps us find it qualitatively, and once we have the influence line diagram, we can get some important quantities which we need for design, like absolute maximum bending moment and shear force under different kinds of loading. There are two major types of loads: dead loads, which include the self weight of structure, floating, etc. They are stationary and constant loads, so they do not change over the lifetime of a structure. So even furniture weight and all are not included in dead load. The self weight of the structure and floating do not change actually. So variation of bending moment, shear force, deflection, whatever the parameters I'm finding out along the sections will be constant due to dead loads. But live loads are like furniture, people weights in buildings, wheel loads and passenger weights in bridges. They move, they change, their patterns can be anything at any point. So the position and magnitude vary with time. So that's where the influence line diagram, that for live load we need influence line diagram. It's a diagram that represents the variation of stress functions such as bending moment, shear force, reaction force, slope or deflection at a fixed section when a unit concentrated load moves from one end to the other end. And then we use the principle of linear superposition. So once I have its response due to a unit load or a moment, I whatever loading conditions I have, I'm going to, if I know for 1 kilonewton, if I apply 10 kilonewton, I'm going to multiply that part with 10. Then suppose I have another force that has 5 kilonewton in a different manner, I'm going to multiply. Then I'm going to, and if the two loads are coming simultaneously, I'm going to add the two of them. That is what the linear principle of linear superposition means. And then we move in phase 2, we looked at review as at determine at in solving indeterminate structures. There was review of degree of structural indeterminacy, introduction to force and displacement methods, Maxwell-Betty's reciprocal theorem. The force method that we looked at was method of consistent deformations applied to beams, trusses, and frames, and uh, Then the displacement methods are slope deflection, moment rotation, and stiffness matrix method. So there's 1 week left next Tuesday where we will look at the stiffness matrix method. But apart from that, we have already covered everything. Structural indeterminacy, structures that cannot be analyzed using statics or equations of equilibrium are called indeterminate structures, and we have already looked at these just recently. So week 7 was we saw how to apply the method of consistent deformation to beams, then trusses, then frames, and the framework is same. They are just applied in a slightly different manners specific to the these types of elements. Force or compatibility or flexibility methods are where the redundant forces are chosen as unknowns and additional equations are obtained using the compatibility conditions. These are the methods that there are some. These are some methods which are based on this force method concept. We have looked at method of consistent deformation and displacement or equilibrium or stiffness methods. Here, the displacements of joints are taken as unknowns, and equilibrium equations are like expressed at the nodes at the joints to find out these displacements, these unknowns, and once they have been solved, we can find out the redundant forces. Moment distribution, slope deflection, stiffness matrix method. The differences between the two methods basically are that in force method the forces are taken as unknowns, in displacement methods the displacements are taken as unknowns. And when we choose a force method is when the degree of static indeterminacy is less than degree of kinematic indeterminacy, because in force method the number of unknowns is equal to the degree of static indeterminacy, and vice versa here. Degree of kinematic indeterminacy, if that's less, I will have lesser number of unknowns in displacement method, so that's what I'm going to use. Method of consistent deformation. We find the degree of indeterminacy, choose statically determinate and stable primary structure, and we identify the redundance and compute displacement of primary structure subjected to external loading and redundance separately at those points where conditions of compatibility exist. Then we solve the redundance using these conditions of compatibility. Once we have the redundant forces, it becomes a determinate structure. So then we plot the BMD and SFD by superimposing effects of redundance and the given loading on the primary structure. So we treat as if the redundant force as if they were also a separate loading, and the existing loading also exists. So this is also somewhere we are using the principle of linear superposition. The steps of slope deflection methods, we draw separate parts of the beam in between the supports, we compute the fixed end moments, and then we have these moment equations that for each segment which accounts for the rotations and also for relative displacement, like relative settlement if any. We write the compatibility conditions or boundary conditions. The joints are combined to get zero moment, and we write the equations in matrix form. Well, we might not write it in matrix form, but if there are three or more unknowns, we generally use write it in matrix form, invert the matrix and solve it, and we solve these moment equations. So we will get the thetas at every point, and we will solve for the reactions of the beams or frames by using the forces and the moments. We find the individual components. Moment distribution method, what we do is we first assume that each joint is fixed for rotation. Joint is fixed, so it's locked. Then by locking and unlocking each joint in succession, the internal moments at the joints are slowly distributed and balanced until each joint reaches a final equilibrium condition. So that is what we do with the cross moments. We carry on to the support reactions till there is a equilibrium conditions in my last row. Then we can say that I have got the final moments. And the stiffness matrix method, which we haven't looked at yet, in this method, displacements at the joints are taken as unknowns, and equations are expressed in terms of these unknown displacement. And the basic equation that we solve is K is a stiffness matrix, D is a displacement vector, and F is the force vector. So we what we do is we find this D vector as K inverse into F, and this is mainly a method that is useful for computerization of problems, because structural analysis, the more complicated the structure becomes, it quickly becomes unmanageable. The kind of structures that we have solved are so simple, like which you can solve by hand. They are not really practical structures. So stiffness matrix method is the first step towards computerization, and it forms the basis of finite element method, which is used in most structural analysis software. It's like abacus. Abacus is written, like you would have heard of abacus probably. It's a structural analysis software which is used for research purposes. It is the base. It runs on finite element method, which borrows from the stiffness matrix method basically. So generally in an undergraduate structural analysis course in any exams, you generally won't be asked questions on this, but it's just a concept. The concepts, it can be applied and scaled to large problems, but the concept starts really simply. So okay, that's about what the course is about mostly. Are there any questions? Okay, then I'll end the class. Dinesh, if you send me that solution later on, I'll respond. Like you have my mail ID, you can send me later. I'll respond there.
Yes, ma'am. I will share. Till it's taking time, I will share.
Okay, okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
okay. I'll end the class then. The last class is next Tuesday.